hear the word testimony, what comes to mind?
Stories. Whenever testimony to me is not just what has happened in your life, it's what has happened as a result of what happened in your life.
Oh yeah, I like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that was deeper than I was expecting.
Oh, well, welcome.
That was really good. So a little context as to why we started with that word for Kristi is she has a unique gift, a calling. She has her own podcast called Even If, where people come on and share amazing stories, testimony, experiences, and it has touched a lot of people's lives, including my wife and I's.
Mm-hmm.
And so definitely today want to talk, man, we're going to go a lot of places. So everybody buckle up.
Yeah.
It's going to be fun. I want to talk about Even If, the impact it's had. But more importantly, I want to talk about as these people share their story, it's really, I didn't realize this until I was on your podcast. It's you telling the story as much as they are. And so while you're telling people's testimony and the listener gets the benefit of the who in that story,
Mm-hmm.
I want to talk about the impact that that's had on your life, sitting on that side of the microphone and getting to hear week after week the way that the Lord has powerfully moved in people's lives.
That is something I don't think I'll ever get over. I've said it before and I'll keep saying it. This is the honor of my life. When I started this, it was just you used the word unction when you were on my show. And the thought about unctions, it was just an unction. It was, I think I ought to do this. And the Lord really guided on what this was going to look like, this podcast itself. But getting to sit with people and hear what happened in their life and then how the Lord showed up in it and then what he did through it, what that did was it cracked my heart open to giving people space to share the stories that they hold. And some people don't talk about their stories because it's hard or it's embarrassing or it's a shameful part of their past, or they don't have necessarily, they've never been given the space to say, this is what happened to me.
Yeah.
And so that's been, it's wrecked me. It honestly, it wrecks me. Every week, whenever somebody tells me about what's going on in their life or how the Lord has redeemed an area of their life, I have been privy to just watching the Lord show up in ways that you just don't realize how active he is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I can only imagine the impact it's had, in your own life, the way that you encounter your own problems, right?
Mm-hmm.
The speed bumps that you encounter in your own life, the times where, you shared very vulnerably
Mm-hmm.
on your podcast recently about how you were under spiritual attack.
Mm-hmm.
Do you find yourself as you continue down the journey of getting to be intimately brought into people's stories and again, uncovering the who
Mm-hmm.
in that story? Are you now addressing speed bumps and do you take things from those stories to attack the enemy?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I think that what's happened is having this place where people are sharing stories and they're coming on and they're being sometimes extremely vulnerable. It's made me more confident in what the Lord is capable of. This has given me courage in a way that to speak into things that I might have stood on the sidelines and never said before. I think the Lord is raising up people that are willing to speak out about. I'll back up and say this. We live in a society where they are trying to marginalize us as Christians for a more liberal life mm-hmm. and normalize those things. And I think that the Lord is giving people some courage in places where they haven't necessarily had it before. And that's me. I've been the person who kind of knew what the Lord had done in my own personal life and in my own my own story, but I had never had the courage to just speak about it in a way that showed other people that what he is doing is powerful. And so I definitely think it's giving me oh man, I'm a lot bolder. I'm a lot bolder than I used to be. And I've never actually publicly shared my own even if story. And that's something that God is working through. He's not going to let me out of it, but there is this boldness growing in me that I am crazy ridiculous for, because it opens your eyes whenever you just take a little bit of boldness, just an ounce. It's amazing what he can do to just grow and expand that. And you don't know how much you have in you until you take the first step. And for me, the first step was saying yes to doing this crazy idea of a podcast where I get to ask people questions and, dive in. And that has been such a joy. But I had no idea how it was going to affect me in so many other areas of my life.
That's incredible. And, one thing that comes to my mind, and I was talking to my wife, Lisa, about having you on, and I was really wrestling with the word to start the podcast.
Okay.
I didn't want to start with testimony because it's something that you do weekly. Mm-hmm. It's something that you do weekly. And I was really struggling with, is that what she does, or is that a part of who she is? And Lisa really brought it home for me. She kept saying trustworthy. That Kristi's trustworthy.
Wow.
And because of that, testimony isn't just what she does. It's not, she doesn't host a podcast about testimony. It's now a part of her because of the trustworthiness. So can you just give us a quick glimpse, and it can be quick, but just in the origin of Even If, how it got started, what the Lord spoke into existence, and then how you just ran with it?
Yeah, sure. So it's been about 16 months ago now, as we're recording this. I had a nudge from the Lord. I felt it one day of, you ought to start a podcast. And I didn't do anything with it immediately. I just thought it. And I'm an Enneagram 7, which both of us, have you talked about that?
Yes.
And so as an Enneagram 7, I love adventure and I love doing new things. And I thought, wow, that would be super fun. But then quickly I thought, what would I talk about? And so I kind of I didn't dismiss it. I just didn't run with it. Mm-hmm. And maybe a week later, I'm sitting in a small group. I have a Wednesday morning Bible study, and we're sitting there talking. And I at that point was co-leading it with another girl. And somebody said, Kristi, you ought to start a podcast. And I mean, my spirit just kind of leapt, and I went, okay, that's the second.
Hey, that's been planted.
Yeah, I was like,
well,
it's funny you say that, because that'd be kind of cool. And then I shared with them, I was like, yeah, well, that's funny you say that, because I'd kind of thought about it. And then I took it to my husband. He's kind of a voice of reason in my world. He is quite literally sometimes the guardrails to keep this train on the track,
sure.
Which is a great thing. You need those people in your life. And I just said, Lord, John, just, what do you think about this? What do you say about this? This is kind of the thought I have. And he is a very conservative, and when I say conservative, I just mean like he's a very methodical thinking person. And so for him to we were standing in our kitchen. I remember him just going, oh my gosh, that actually makes a lot of sense.
Wow. And coming from him, that had to be pretty powerful.
Oh, it was crazy powerful. And it still I get chill bumps all over my body every time I talk about it, because it was an immediate confirmation from in him that as a husband he gave me. And so that was the moment I said yes. When it was that third person or that third moment of going, yeah, this is okay. And I felt very much at peace in my spirit. I'm not the kind of person, I struggle mightily with self-promotion. And one of the things about starting the podcast was I was like, man, this is going to feel like self-promotion. I'm part of the podcast. And I just kept thinking, no, I don't want to be like, that's not me. That's not how I want to roll. And so I had to really wrestle with the Lord about what this was going to be about. And I will fully admit that I said yes to doing the podcast before I had any idea what it was actually going to look like. I just
that's
knew He
amazing.
had said that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So how did even if I don't know if it transformed, because I truthfully haven't gone back to listen to the very first episodes.
Sure.
I picked up with, I think, Jessica Dykes and ran with it from there.
Yeah.
How did it transition into this platform for, because it's not just testimonies. I mean, people come on and share awesome experiences and
Sure.
truth and revelation, but the heart of it is that the who in your story is really transformative.
Mm-hmm.
Did it start that way? Did it progress into that?
It started out because I was a chicken. I started out, my friend that I was co-leading that Bible study with, her name is Jamie Hazinga. She and I started out, and I would tell other people's stories to Jamie on the podcast. Our very first episodes are of she and I sharing other people's stories. It wasn't your voice. It wasn't Jessica's voice. It was me telling these stories. And part of that was because what they don't tell you about starting a podcast is it's going to grow you more than it's going to grow anybody else. And it was a matter of I was just terrified of letting somebody loose on a podcast to say anything they wanted. And so, whatever, control freaks unite. I thought, okay, I can take their story and then I'll tell Jamie and then we'll talk about it.
Yeah.
And so that the Lord quickly showed me that was not sustainable, and it was not the most powerful way for someone to be able to, it was just not, that was not the most impactful way for this podcast to keep going. And I think the Lord knew this was the premise of it, but He was holding so much more for it. He gave me the freedom to get started. That's one of the things I love about the Lord is that He knew I was scared. He knew that I needed a friend to hold my hand. And He didn't chastise me for it. He said, okay, if that's what you need, go ahead. And Jamie has been a huge supporter. Oh my gosh, I love her. She's taken a full-time job. She's a young mama. So what happened was it just evolved, and I went, oh, I can do this. I can stand on so when I tell you it's made me more bold in my faith, I mean, I was scared to do this by myself at first. So when I see just in 8 months, because this is, this podcast is only 8 months at this point, how much He has grown me up, man, I won't ever get over that.
Yeah.
I don't ever want to get over that.
That's incredible. And I love that you talk about how the podcast grows you up.
Yeah.
And self-promotion, because I had no social media when I started this. I didn't know how to, it was embarrassing. I got on Instagram. I didn't know how to post anything. So I had to watch YouTube videos on how even to post on Instagram.
Yes.
So it is this weird dynamic of, these are a lot of work. Putting together a podcast. We talked about how, Lisa and I's story, you cut into 3 separate episodes and you meshed them together, and just, it was beautiful. It allowed our story to be told in a way that it's impossible for Lisa and I to tell it that way because of how you masterfully put it together. I know now how much time you invested in that. And so if you do that, you go on your social media, or you go, you talk to your friends, you do want people to listen to the thing.
Yeah.
And it is this delicate balance of self-promotion versus, hey, I do think that this is a story that could be impactful. And I know that people, just in our story, so this is just simply our story. You've got, a year of content of people's radical experiences on your own platform. I can't tell you how many people have reached out to either Lisa or I about the story they heard on your podcast, that have sat in our living room. Lisa had a meeting with 2 individual ladies. That's just yesterday. The reach of this thing is, it's real. It's impactful. And there's a reason that the Lord whispered, start a podcast. in your ear.
Mm-hmm.
It's making a difference in people's lives. Not
It is.
in our life, in your life,
Yeah.
but it does make a difference in people's lives.
I lost count of how many people reached out after y'all's story came out those couple of weeks, because y'all's was a first. I divided it into 3 weeks because there was so much beauty in it, and the Lord really spoke to me and said, I want you to slow down and share as much of this as you can. And in that, so during those 3 weeks, the people that reached out and said, thank you for sharing this with me. I don't realize, my husband and I are walking through this exact same thing. My wife struggles with this. I had a husband reach out to me and say, my wife is struggling with this in the pornography, and it was mind blowing how many people that one affected. And it happens in a different regard for every episode because every story is unique. And the people that it ministers to, what I've found is there's 2 things that happen. It either ministers to you because it's something you understand, or it cracks your heart open for more compassion for people who have dealt with certain things. And to me, that's where God is using this, because we need other people's stories. Without other people's stories, we're living in vacuums.
Yeah.
We're isolated, and stories are what connect us. The story is what you get that makes you feel like you're, I don't want to say alive, but our stories and knowing your story and you and what Lisa walked through, well, forever now, you and I and Lisa have this beautiful friendship where I've been able to sit across the table from you and grieve and rejoice at what the Lord has done. And that's what God wants to do in our relationships.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so it's just an honor. I get to do that every week with people.
That's so cool. That's so cool. And I want to transition to,
all right, what you got?
Obviously you've got a podcast. It's about Jesus most of the time.
Jesus.
Or all the time.
Yes.
Just paint a picture of what does your story looked like? Were you saved as a child? And then more importantly, how it's morphed and changed, and how he's continued to reveal himself in you, to you, through you. What does that journey with the Father look like, and when did it start? And I'm going to move this just because it's catching on your jacket.
Okay, no problem. Okay, so am I close enough still?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I was saved 3rd grade, church camp, Looters of Oka church camp, Baptist encampment.
Looters.
Looters of Oka.
I love it.
At the Baptist encampment. We were living in Anson, Texas. My dad was a football coach, and that's where we were living at the time. And I had the opportunity to go to, I think it was like RAGA camp, that if anybody's familiar with the Southern Baptist, whenever we were growing up, that's what we went to. And I went to camp there. I felt the Lord. Oh my gosh, I knew it. Like I could feel him tugging on my heart. And I remember I accepted him on the last night of camp. And that's where the story began. Mm-hmm. So really and truly, I'm in my mid 40s here now. And I don't remember not walking with the Lord, which was a great benefit, because I believe the Lord knew, okay, she's going to need me early in life, because I grew up in a chaotic home, mentally unstable parent. And I knew that, or I look back now and I can see the Lord had just covered me. And I often do this. I'll put my hand over, because I could just imagine myself as a child with the Lord just covering me with his hand. And I was loved by my parents. There were just some instabilities there.
Sure.
And so I don't want to paint anyone in a horrible light by any stretch of the imagination. That was part of it. And when you're growing up like that, I think the Lord just knew I needed that covering. And so I've been walking with the Lord now for longer than I can do math. And, but it hasn't always, I wouldn't necessarily say that it's always just been a real, deep, it definitely grew. Oh gosh. junior high school was junior high school faith.
Yeah.
I mean, let's just, FCA and Young Life and,
Sure.
all of those things, and church on Sunday. We went to church on Sunday. I mean, I knew a lot about the Lord. I knew. But it wasn't until I was probably 22, 23 where the Lord began to show me that there is a lot more than what I had been experiencing. And my husband and I were dating. We weren't engaged yet, but we were dating. And the Lord was actively showing John and I that he wanted us to put him at the head of this relationship. And he was making, I don't think the Lord ever forces anything, but he had made it very apparent that for us to be able to walk this marriage out, we knew we were heading toward marriage. And for us to be able to walk this marriage out in a way that was honoring and glorifying to him, that was where it began to change. And we ended up in some, I'm shameless plug here, okay? We didn't talk about it back then, but we went to pre-engagement counseling.
Oh, nice.
A friend of mine, her name was Carla. I'd kind of told her, I told her some of the things that were going on in my life. And she said, Kristi, I think you and John ought to talk to this guy named Scott. And Scott Latham, who is an incredible man of God, I mean, just wisdom wrapped up in the flesh. I mean, just, y'all have talked about the guy that y'all sit with that just the red line to God, and he can just hear God. And Scott began to, I'll tie this up. I don't know how long you want me to go with this, but the wounds of my childhood and the things that John and I were about to bring into our marriage were becoming very evident. Like we were beginning to realize, like, okay, there's some woundedness and brokenness here. And Scott was able to give us language around those things and set us kind of back on the path of, okay, here's how you navigate this.
Yeah.
And so that was where, that was where I think both of us really exploded in faith.
That's amazing. That's cool. And someone wise once told me that there are no such things as marriage problems. There's individual problems that we bring into a marriage. So what a blessing that I think everybody needs a Scott in their life.
Oh my gosh. He ended up marrying us. And he and his wife, Diana, did all of our premarital counseling and, our pre-engagement counseling. We were living in Abilene at the time. And so we'd come up here to go to Tech baseball games. And then he was here in Lubbock. And so we'd go to counseling and go to a Tech baseball game and then go home.
Yeah.
And we were,
awesome.
we were in our 20s.
That's a great day.
Oh yeah. Because John was about to go to physical therapy school. And so he was, but we were living in Abilene. I was doing my student teaching. And so anyways, it was just, I love how the Lord put us on, like I said, he doesn't force us to do anything. But what he does do is he gives us these opportunities to step into what he's holding. And both of us knew we wanted what he wanted for our marriage. But we had to figure out how to get there before we could get married. And I don't think our marriage has near the beauty, and it's not perfect. Please do not misunderstand, but it has been a God-honoring marriage, and I think that's because we really slowed our roll before we ever got engaged.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, going back to, the Lord pulling you into that, hey, there's some things that need to be addressed here before you get married. Someone really wise shared this analogy with me, and he's very hesitant to use the word conviction. He's like, I'm not saying that we don't get convicted, or don't hear me. But he said, conviction can oftentimes be associated with shame or condemnation.
Yes.
And the Lord doesn't do those things. He said, what the Lord does is he simply holds up truth. Hey, you're going down this path. All I can see is your perfection because you're covered in the blood of Jesus. That's the way I see you. I see you as righteous. I see you as a saint. I see you as holy. But I'm going to continuously hold up truth. Now, this truth may elicit some type of visceral reaction within you, but he was holding up the truth of there's some things that need to be addressed here. Mm-hmm. And that's what I love so much about the relationship we have with our Father is you're right, he's a gentleman. Mm-hmm. But there's always this constant tension that we live with between truth and over here.
Mm-hmm. And it's an invitation.
It's an invitation.
Well, and I've said it on my podcast before, and I'll say it here too. We get to decide what we do with those invitations. We get to decide what we do with the things that happen to us. We get to decide what it is that we want to do with the things the Lord shows us. And sometimes we do the things that, sometimes we step into it, and sometimes we run away from it. And sometimes we run away from it and then we step into it.
Certainly.
Which is, that's part of my story. I definitely ran away from the Lord. I don't know if you want to go there or not, but man, there was a season of life, some family dynamics broke down around 2016, and I spent about 18 months just running away from God. I was mad.
Yeah.
I was angry at him for what had happened.
I think that's a lot of people.
Oh, yeah.
Kristi, I think a lot of people, a lot of like capital LOT mm-hmm. of people are mad at God.
Yeah.
And what do you think led you to be mad at him mm-hmm. versus just mad in general? Why was it directed specifically at God?
Well, because I had been begging him for a good 2 decades to, in my mind, fix the challenges from my family of origin. I had been begging him. And I had stayed in this relationship, and it was messy, and it was, at times, it was abusive. And I had begged him to fix it. And he had not answered my prayer. And he hadn't answered my prayer in the way I thought he would, because I'm kind of a happy ending girl. I'm the girl who thinks we're going to get the happy ending. We're going to, it's always going to work out. And,
sure.
You're going to have a happy ending. And I had been begging him for the better part of 2 decades for a happy ending. And in 2016, when it became quite obvious that if I was going to, well, let me just say this. I'm sorry, I'll stutter. I'll quit stuttering for you. In 2016, things just fell apart.
There was an ending, but it wasn't a happy ending.
Well, I had to make the painful choice to draw a boundary that I had avoided drawing for a good 20 years.
Yeah.
And when I drew that boundary, I thought things would be better. I thought that by finally saying, okay, this is not healthy. This is not okay. The things that are happening, I thought that my life would be better when I did, quote unquote, the right thing. And I was very much at peace. I wasn't walking outside of the Lord's will. And this is what has really kind of wrecked me in life, is that you can be fully inside the Lord's will. And it does not mean that everything is good and you're okay. And I found myself at the bottom of the darkest pit after I drew the boundary in 2016. And I got mad at him because I thought you were always going to be there. I thought this was always going to be good. I thought that you were going to rescue this situation. And what I was really saying was, I thought you were going to work this out the way I thought it was going to work out. And that is not what happened.
Yeah. So in 2016, you're angry with God.
Yep.
Where did you land? And what did it look like in between? Because did he fix the situation, or did he work on you, or both? Or
he did not fix the situation. In fact, it ended up getting worse, which I did not even think humanly possible. And I ran away from him. And by running away from him, I began to numb myself. I worked a lot, but then I also drank a lot of red wine. And it didn't start out like, I had never struggled with any kind of an addiction issue, but I was drinking every night to keep myself from feeling the pain that I was dealing with. I was in an immense amount of pain. And people in pain will often do anything they can to circumvent the pain instead of just going through it and dealing with it and allowing the Lord to tend to the wounds. I tried to go around it. And by going around it, I was starting to drink a little more. And then I never fell into what I would call alcoholism. I would say that I was just using it as a coping tool of choice. I've never struggled with any kind of that addiction. So I'm not trying to speak into what other people might be going through, because that could very well be what they are in. But for me, I was using alcohol as a way to cope. And so the darkness, I told him, fine, you've allowed this to happen. So I'm just done with you for a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The drinking was just an unneeded crutch.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And then, I've never shared this story with anybody. This is public. I've never put this publicly anywhere, except for in 2017, I drank like a fool on New Year's Eve. And a couple of months before that, I'd realized I'm probably drinking too much. This has been 18 months since everything has fallen apart. And I thought, this is just not me. This is not who I am. And so I thought something along the lines of kind of like what happened with the podcast. I have ideas in my head, but I have a lot of ideas. So sometimes I kind of have to let them sit before I decide if it's something to go with. And I said, I wonder what it'd be like to go a whole year without drinking. Just a whole year. Go like 365 days and not drink.
And that was planted in you before you stopped?
Yeah.
Before this New Year's?
Well before. Probably October.
Yeah.
Before the New Year's. And I thought, that'd be interesting. That would be a really cool experiment. Remember? Enneagram 7. And so I thought, that'd be interesting. And I didn't really commit to anything. And then I went to some friend's house on New Year's Eve, and I drank like a fish, and I woke up with a hangover on New Year's Day. I hope this is not too raw.
No, this is good.
Yeah.
January 1st was a rough day.
January 1st, 2018, I laid on that couch, and it was rough, man. It was really rough. And I can laugh about this now because the Lord has redeemed it. Back then, it was not so funny. But I remember laying on that couch, and I thought, this has got to change. I am hurting. I am in pain. I'm not allowing the Lord to deal with it. I mean, I'm saved. I'm a believer, but I was not walking with the Lord in the time I knew he was most capable of carrying me. And so I was living in this juxtaposition of knowing what he could do and then just trying to do it myself. And so I decided that January 1st, 2018, all right, well, fine. I'm going to go a whole year without drinking alcohol. And really, I think the Lord and I have come to the agreement. I really like extremes. I'm a girl that's like, I'm all in. So I was all in. And on January 2nd, because on January 1st, I didn't do anything but lay on the couch. But on January 2nd, I opened up a new, fresh Word document, and I started writing. And I started chronicling what it was like to not drink. I chronicled about what it was like when I was drinking and why I was drinking. And so it was, at first, it was just every day. I just journal and talk about how, and this is really kind of my own even if moment. It was the moment where I realized, do I have the faith in me? Do I really trust him to work all this mess out? And instead of running to him, I decided that I would let him have it.
And the way you let him have it was you wrote it out.
I did.
So it's similar to speaking it out. You put a pen to paper and
I'd always been a writer. I've written for years. I had blogs back in the day when blogs were, all the rage. And I still write quite a bit. But this was where he and I met, and he just began to minister to me on those pages. And I would write things. I remember writing things like, I didn't drink today, and I was really mad, or I didn't. And it wasn't ever. What I realized very quickly is that I wasn't ever. Your light just went off. What I realized was my yes to stopping drinking into this challenge. I basically just challenged myself to, I'm not going to go a year without drinking, but that was a yes. And it was almost, I think probably to a certain extent, it was, I could control this. There were so many things out of control in my life with my family of origin and the way that was all going down. But I thought, I have control over how I handle this. And I think we can over spiritualize things. I was not in any shape or form going, oh, this is going to make me more godly. Oh, this is going to be such a spiritual experience. In fact, I remember praying, at one point just saying, Lord, you're going to have to do with this because I can't anymore. I can't do this.
What a great spot to be in. Look, I'm sure not in that moment, but looking back, what a fantastic place to be.
It was the perfect place for him to be able to go, okay, let's go.
Now I can enter this story.
So that was my even if moment. I had to decide, am I going to let you have access to this, or am I going to keep trying to do this on my own? And I just made up my mind that we were going to let him have access to it. And I didn't ever say that. It was what I did.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
It happened in your heart.
Yeah.
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 So fast forward, you start journaling, you're writing these thoughts, experiences, whatever would come to your mind. You're writing them out, turning them over to the Lord. Where did you land? What was and I'm not saying I'm not saying you're done.
Yeah.
But you're mad at God, and then you came out of this, and what was going on in your heart, soul, spirit?
What finally happened was giving him that yes and starting to write was where he began to open my eyes to, I'm writing your story. I am doing things, and I have allowed this for my purposes. You're going to have to trust me in this. And so it kind of became a trust building exercise between the Lord and I, for him to show me how he was going. I knew he was going to use it. And I told him, over and over, I know you're going to use this. I know you can. I know. And that the song, Even If Mercy Me, by Mercy Me, in one of the lines it says, I know you're able and I know you can. Save through the fire with your mighty hand.
Yeah.
But even if you don't, my hope is in you alone. And that really became that's where I got to. I got to the point where I had to just trust him no matter what. And it got nasty. It got real nasty.
Yeah.
And even if it got nasty, even if it wasn't going to be this happy ending that I'd always thought I would get, I could trust him. And he proved himself trustworthy. So when you said, I'm sorry.
I'm going to throw the camera away.
I don't know what that is.
All right, I'll try one more time.
All right, give it.
It'll be good.
It will still be just fine. Well, and so where we were talking about whenever you said trustworthy, that Lisa had called me trustworthy. I don't think I'm really the trustworthy one, but I know who is.
Oh, that's good.
And I know that what happened in my life is I went from this place of not being trustworthy. I wasn't solid enough to hold these. I could never have held spaces like this for people. The weekly stuff I do with people, there's no way on this earth that I could hold that space for people and either not just be an emotional wreck or even have the insight or the wisdom to deal with it, because I hadn't let the Lord tend to my own wounds. And in that woundedness, I was very untrustworthy, or I felt I was very untrustworthy. So when you said that to me today, I was like, oh, wow, that's a full circle moment.
So you keep using the word wounds, and it's funny that we started this podcast with the word testimony. Did I tell you about the revelation the Lord gave me about when he came out of the grave and his wounds and doubting Thomas, that whole thing?
No, share.
So this is going to be on a radical solo episode, and I'll expand a little bit more on how this all happened. But I was sitting one day and I'm 99% sure it's Luke, that recounts the story of doubting Thomas.
Okay.
And something just wasn't settling in me
Mm-hmm.
when I was reading this. I don't know what it was. The only way I could say it was this unsettledness. And I began to just ask the Holy Spirit, like, what am I unsettled about? Like, I have to read this with your eyes because I'm missing something here. And he just, the Father often talks to me in questions.
Mm-hmm.
And he just said, do you think it's strange that part of Jesus's ministry was healing, physical healing, mental healing, spiritual healing, that he would be raised from the grave, and yet he called Thomas to put his fingers inside of his wounds. It says that Thomas reached inside of his, on the side where he was cut open.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, that is kind of strange. He's like, what do you think the purpose is? I'm like, I don't know. You're going to have to tell me.
Tell me.
So I'm having this crazy dialogue, with the Holy Spirit. And fast forward, essentially where he landed was, there's this duality that exists in the scriptures, in that we often start reading in the New Testament, and we start reading the New Testament as if it's the new covenant. And that's not really true. The new covenant didn't take place until the death, burial, and resurrection. And so we have to read ourselves into these, I hate using the word stories, these examples of that we are oftentimes the disciples, or we are oftentimes the people that are encountering the disciples or Jesus. But now that we have the great partner, we're also Jesus in these stories. He is actually showing us an example of what living out his ministry looks, because he's the perfect example of living out his ministry. And the Holy Spirit was like, Jesus came out of the grave because those wounds, they were his testimony.
Wow.
And when you walk with me, you may be wounded, but I'll never, ever let those wounds stay wounds. And he actually said, which is one thing I love about your podcast, he said those wounds immediately became a testimony when Thomas touched them. They didn't hurt. They didn't cause him physical pain. It's, the scripture doesn't say Jesus jumped and said, ow.
Yeah.
Oh, don't touch me there.
Yeah.
That hurts. That's one place you can't touch me, Thomas. No, he actually invited Thomas in to touch those intimate places, those open places in him. And in that moment, those wounds were no longer wounds. They were testimonies. And then furthermore, it kind of coalesced with this, where it says that we move from glory to glory to glory.
Yes.
Well, we also step on the serpent's head. And so these moments that we think are above us, that this is too much, when we look at Jesus and we say, can't do it, can't navigate this. And he says, well, I can. All of a sudden you look down and you're standing on top of that problem.
Yep.
You're now something that was sent to kill, steal, and destroy. You're now ascended and you're stepping on top of it, and you're moving from glory to glory to glory. So I love that you use wounds, and I love that we talked about testimony, because that is how we walk out this life of faith.
Yes.
Is our wounds are our testimony.
They are.
And we have to invite people in to touch them, because here's the coolest part, is the minute that Thomas touched Jesus's side, depending on, what script or what
translation.
There you go. Yeah. Translation you read. It says that Thomas said, not out of his mouth, but out of his heart. He had a heart change. My God, you are my Savior. He experienced Jesus in a way that even walking with the man and experiencing him, well, we're just not going to have video, for 3 years, he couldn't.
Yeah. Even though we knew him.
Until he touched his wounds.
Yeah.
That whole thing was just incredible to me. And it put a whole new light on what our testimonies, the power that our testimonies really carry.
I think they do. Well, and one of the things that was important to me is that I didn't want to talk from woundedness or through woundedness, because I think people can bleed all over other people if it's not something that the Lord has healed. And so I think of them in terms of scars. Whenever you said that when you touch my wounds, they can't hurt me. They didn't hurt Jesus, but they were, because they had been healed. He was alive. He was alive and breathing, and they weren't still hurting.
They were still there.
They were still there.
Absolutely.
And what I've realized is the messiness that I had to walk through, my family of origin, which, by the way, God is so redeeming, and has my relationship with my dad. My mom has passed now, but my dad and I, like, he's redeemed that relationship. He has made truly beauty from ashes in a lot of ways. And what I've realized is that's always going to be part of my life. But when I allow, even in sitting here with you today and sharing about this, which I've never really talked about. I'm just a little trippied out that I'm even talking about it, honestly. But the fact that I was able to, that other people might be able to go, oh, that's my story too. We don't talk about family estrangement in public.
No.
We don't talk about, that is like taboo. You do not talk about.
Yeah, we may say, we have one of those crazy uncles too. You know, that might be the extent of our openness.
Or, every family has troubles. Every family has struggles. No, I was literally estranged from my family for 4 years.
Yeah.
And it was the worst, hardest season I've ever walked through. Oh. And yet, he has used it to minister to, I don't know how many people. Because what we'll do, and what we tend to do, now I share stories publicly on my podcast a lot, but a lot of times our testimonies, the things God has done in our life, are shared across a table. They're shared at coffee with a friend. They're shared in a space where it's a trusted space. And so there's plenty of places where I've shared parts of this story to minister to other people. But that's what you've got to realize, is that the things that have hurt you, the things that have changed and altered the course of your life, those are the very things God wants to use. Because what's more powerful than seeing how someone has overcome something or come through something? Because when you see what God has done in someone's life, it's typically not when they're standing on a podium getting their gold medal.
Right.
It's what did they have to sacrifice to get to the place where they are today. And I am not the healed human that I am if he does not come in and just tender the wounds. Mm-hmm. And I think it goes both ways. I had to lay down and I had to submit to him for that healing. I had to say, you can do this, I cannot. And then as soon as you say that, he comes in and he ushers in and he begins to tend to whatever it is that you've dealt with.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love it. And he's just faithful.
He is so faithful.
He was even faithful when you didn't think he was being faithful.
Oh, yeah.
He's just so proud of you. And just he knew on this day, Kristi's going to surrender and she's going to have her mind blown.
Oh, yeah. Well, I had actually done what I think I needed to do for a long time, but I didn't realize the cost that it was going to come with. And so when you don't count the cost ahead of time, that's even biblical. They talk about you've got to figure out how much this is going to cost. Well, there were ways that I could anticipate that this was going to be painful, but I knew that what I was doing was right, but I was angry at him because it was so hard. And I thought it was going to be easier once I did what he had asked me to do.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. The work often is not fun.
No.
You and I've shared, or you've shared with me, and only briefly, but this is in 2016. You start writing, you've submitted, the Lord's really doing a work in you. How did that culminate during COVID, or speak to kind of what happened in your family during the COVID season with what you experienced and what I think is pretty cool through your kids? So you're at home during COVID. Mm-hmm. Church was in a weird spot for everybody.
Wasn't it?
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, you're live casting on your TV.
Oh, yeah.
You're not live casting on your TV.
Yes.
There's
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
weird season that all of the whole institutional church went through
Yeah.
during COVID. But I remember you telling me that your kids came in one day and said, "Hey, I want to watch something."
Yep.
What was that, and did it have any impact in your life? Did it make you and John see some things differently?
Woo. So my son comes in that summer and he says, "Hey," and we were still doing church online, and he says, "Hey, there's this there's this guy I found on TikTok." And TikTok,
which
yes.
I know.
I
know
know.
we talked earlier about Instagram and YouTube, but
Yeah.
it still seems so
Well,
crazy when.
yeah. And as a parent, whenever you have a child coming to you and going, "Hey, I've found spiritual guidance on TikTok."
This guy's speaking into my life via TikTok.
Yes. So immediately I went, "Well, let's check this out." And so we turned, he said, "I want to watch this guy on Sunday." And I said, "Okay." So at this point, he's 14. My son is 14 years old ish. And I was like, "All right, well, let's, whatever you want." Absolutely.
Yeah.
You want to watch this guy on church? I want to know what you're watching.
Yeah.
And so we gathered around and started watching, and this man was speaking truth into my son's life. And his name, I don't know if you want to keep this, but his name is Mike Todd. He's at Transformation Church in Oklahoma City, and is, when the phrase radical is your podcast, and he has a radical faith on what God has done, even in his own life. And he's very open about, what he was doing before he started walking with the Lord. And it resonated in my son's spirit that this is truth. And when you get your heart cracked open to truth, you can't go back.
Mm-hmm.
You just don't go back. Once you experience that moment where the Lord really meets you in a moment, and I think that, I've had that in my life, blessedly, thankfully, but I think my son, it really opened his eyes to, there's so much more. And so, COVID was not a fun experience, but it sure did change the way that our lives wanted, quote unquote, church to look like. And that was a slow turn, slow process, but inevitably it really did encourage both of my kids to go deeper in their faith.
Yeah, and one thing that I think's cool about that is your son's 14.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
14.
There's a depth of wisdom in that kid. I'm telling you, wow. There are things he asks me that are just way more profound than I was thinking when I was 14. I'll just put it that way. But he's a thinker in spirit, and he really is a truth seeker.
Yeah, and of all the things I'm sure that a 14-year-old boy can be seeking out on TikTok,
yeah,
he is consuming the thing that he chooses to consume that catches his heart, which speaks to who he is, speaks to how he's parented, but captures his heart is someone that was presenting him the gospel in a way that he hadn't heard previously.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
It was really cool. And I don't think that was coincidental. You've got 14-year-olds are so impressionable. And he's also, I'm going to say this for any parents listening out there, he is an gregarious kid, but he's also really kind of an introvert. He's outgoing, but he's an introvert.
Yeah, that's me.
And that stereotypical Wednesday night Bible study in a group setting really wasn't working for him. And so I love that the Lord said, I'm going to meet you and I'm going to speak to you where you can hear it. And at a most impressionable time, God began to pour into him what he needed in a place where he could hear it. No. And so for any parents that are struggling with, well, my kids are really more introverted, they don't really necessarily love all the craziness that, sometimes youth is. That's not for every kid. And so I'm just, for any parent who needs to hear this today,
That's good.
that the Lord's going to meet and minister to your children. It is not a one size fits all.
And it's oftentimes going to be outside of the church.
Absolutely. I mean, this was on an internet platform that the enemy does not mean for good, I guarantee you. And yet there the Lord, there it was right there.
Yeah.
And ministering to my kiddo. Yeah.
That's amazing. And I love that. And I'm going to use that as a transition, because we're talking about, the gospel being presented in ways that were unique, things that are happening in your life that so many would discount, right? There's people out there that walk around that they are actually living a miracle.
Yes.
And they don't realize they're living a miracle, which is unfortunate, because there's so much freedom when you say there was nothing here that I did. And I know that sounds upside down. Like, no, I didn't get myself through this problem.
Oh, but see, God's economy is upside down.
Yeah.
He doesn't operate the way we think economy should work.
Mm-hmm.
Give and take. That's not how God works.
Yeah. So I say this kind of not to the end, but towards the end. And I'm going to tease this. This is going to be teased in the opening credits of the podcast here. But Kristi reached out to me a couple of weeks ago, and we knew you were going to be on the podcast, but you said, hey, I got a story. And it aligns with what the Lord had put on my heart. So to kind of set this up, again, when the Lord began to show me what this podcast was going to be, the theme that kept coming back to me was kind of 3 words: marvel at the mystery. Marvel at the mystery.
That's beautiful.
That we as believers, we have forgotten that the Father is a mystery, and we're never going to be able to figure him out, ever.
Nope.
And his ways are not our ways, and that he works uniquely, and that there is, I'm not saying that there's disorder or chaos, but he may work in a way that offends your mind.
Yeah.
And offends your belief about him. He actually probably wants to. And one thing I love about this story is it's going to offend some people's minds. But you and I were talking before we hit the record button. And we mentioned Acts chapter 8. So if anybody hears this, crack open your phone as you're listening, turn to Acts chapter 8 and verse 26. And these stories that Kristi will share, it's biblical.
Yeah.
It's happened before, which means it'll happen again. And so I'm just going to kind of let you run with this crazy radical story, set it up, and then I really want you to, at the end, put a bow on what it's meant for you in your life and how it's shaped your thought processes about what can and cannot happen.
Okay. So it was probably around 1990. Okay, so this has been a hot minute. And I told Andrew when I reached out to him, I had an experience that if he's talking about radical things that have happened in a person's life, I think I have something that might qualify. And it
definitely grabbed my attention.
Well, I got to say that, and I feel like we're teasing people at this point, but I really thought, do I say this? Because, whenever you start talking about the radical things God's done in your life, people will start looking at you like, wow, she done crazy. She lost it. Yeah. But so in 1990, my mom and I had gone to Fort Worth. And if anybody you're going to probably need to get out a map. And I think Andrew's going to share.
I'll put some pictures up.
Yeah. He's going to share some pictures so you can get some frame of reference. But I'll try, if you're not looking, to give you enough of an idea that you get it. All right. Is that a deal? Is that a deal, people? So my mom and I, we lived in Abilene, and the shopping in Abilene was not fabulous. So we would typically go to Fort Worth, sometimes Dallas, to go shopping. And then it's just a day trip, couple of hours here, couple hours there, shop, eat dinner, go home.
Come home. Yeah.
Yeah. My mom had grown up outside of Weatherford. She had family there. So I'm setting the stage to say this. My mom knew her way around the Dallas-Fort Worth area like the back of her hand.
This trip was not her first rodeo into the Metroplex.
No, not even, yeah. We didn't even need a map. I mean, the woman just knew where she was. We came and went all the time. And so we had gone to Fort Worth. We had gone to the Hewlin Mall, which is off of I-20 in South Fort Worth. And back then it was a lot less developed. It's grown up a lot, all over the Metroplex. But we were at the mall, and the mall was on the south side of the interstate. It was just right on the interstate. So, you came in from I-20, you left from I-20. It was an in and out. There was no Mixmaster. There were no any crazy turns. And so
there's no tollway expressways.
No. The Chisholm Trail didn't even exist back then. For those who know really and truly what the Dallas-Fort Worth is like. So we're leaving. It's dark. And my mom, we're sitting at the light just on the south side of the interstate to go under the interstate, go under the underpass. We've got to take a left, and then you're on the access road to get on the interstate.
Yep. And for those that are listening to this on YouTube, the map that is now on the screen, Kristi did a pretty cool thing. She brought with her a map from the 1990s. Yeah. So this is going to show this whole scenario as she is accurately setting this up. Yeah. So we were on the access road, and the entry onto I-20 was fairly quick, quarter of a mile to get up onto the access road. So my mom goes under the underpass. She takes a left. And immediately when she turns, there's an 18-wheeler in front of her. And I'm a teenager, so I'm not little. Very present of mind. I'm in the front seat. She and I are talking, and we're not really thinking anything's going on here. Whenever we make this turn, all is well. Well, we make the turn. There's an 18-wheeler in front of us, so she can't go around it because we're just about to get up on the access road. So she's just, slowing her roll to go behind it. And we noticed that there is construction walls where we had never noticed. There was no construction walls or any construction on the other side of the interstate when we were coming in. And I remember my mom saying, I didn't know there was any construction. Mm-hmm. And so we're still behind this 18-wheeler, but real quickly, she goes, where is the on-ramp here? It was very, very quick. My mom just goes, this is weird. And whenever the entrance ramp to get on the interstate doesn't come. Yes, never materializes.
No, literally does not ever materialize. And she is, like I said, very well-versed in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. And I even remember her saying something along the lines of, well, maybe it was closed. We'll just go to the next one. We'll just go to the next on-ramp, whatever. She's not stressed at all at this point. She's just thinking something's weird's going on. And so, okay, so we keep going, maybe a minute. And when you're going 50 or 60 miles an hour, you're moving at a fairly clip. You just think about any access road. You're going to get to the next real fast. And this 18-wheeler is still in front of us. Can't go around. But it's like, and the best I can describe it is we just never came to another on-ramp. And I know that memories are very fluid and they're not always trustworthy. So the fact also that you used the word trustworthy earlier to me actually means a lot. But I hear my mom, as she was not one to, she had colorful language. We'll just say that. And she is past, but she would not be offended for me to share that part with her. Yeah. That I hear her make a colorful comment and point out the window on my side. And there are these Mustangs out the window, and not real Mustangs. This is sculpture. And my mom, you could feel the atmosphere in our car changed. And I remember looking and seeing the Mustangs and what I now know is Williams Square. I did not know what it was called then. I had no idea. But the atmosphere in the car changed, and my mom got very quiet.
Like something has
Yes.
weird
Yes.
has happened here.
Yes. And I did not understand at this point quite yet. I just knew something was weird.
Mm-hmm.
And she said, we're not. And she honestly can't get words out. But we take a corner, like a curve, the road curves. And there is on the left side of the road is the Las Colinas Country Club.
So in 5 minutes-ish,
Yes.
we've gone from South Fort Worth, Hewlin Mall, to 114 O'Connor area in Las Colinas, Irving.
Yeah. Yeah. And that is the point where to just give a little bit more color to this, my mom was a golfer in high school in her teenage years, was well versed on where country clubs were, had driven herself to countless golf tournaments. The woman knew Dallas-Fort Worth. There was no, like, she knew where she was going. And that's one of the things about this story that's, people are like, oh, did y'all just get lost? No, there's no way, because first of all, we wanted to go home. It was late and we had a couple hour drive ahead of it. We weren't going anywhere.
You weren't joyriding.
No.
And you don't go 15 miles in Dallas-Fort Worth in 5 minutes.
No. If you Google map it, whatever, now it's about a 40-minute drive to get from Hewlin Mall to where we were in Irving. And to get there, you would have to go make so many turns. Like, you weren't just going to accidentally end up like down the street.
Yeah,
this
and
was
it's
not.
east.
Yes.
It's east of the desired destination of going west to Abilene.
Yes. So we were traveling west, but this was fascinating to me. And where the Lord has just shown me over the years, like the little bitty things that make something real to you, where my memory first comes up, like in the whenever I realized we were not where we were supposed to be, we were traveling west. We didn't come up to Irving from that's true,
because as you were showing me on the map, you were coming west on 114 access road.
Yeah we were still traveling west. But we could not have been traveling west and gotten to where we needed to go traveling west.
Right.
But we didn't. I mean, there was never a turnaround. There was never anything other than we're not where we were. And my mom never had to stop and ask for directions. I mean, that alone is, she knew as soon as she saw, there we are. And I remember her just saying, what has happened?
Yeah. As soon as she had that point of reference.
Yeah.
She knew where to go.
Yeah.
And
she knew how to get home.
Where she was.
Yeah. She just kept going south on Connor. And then we got back on, what was that? The highway that there's an intersection there that got you to, and she just hopped back on, and like 30, 40 minutes later, we're, back on the other side of Fort Worth again. And I remember there's a point in the Dallas, outside of Fort Worth, I-30 and I-20 merge back outside of Weatherford.
Yes.
And we were we should have been on I-20 coming to that meeting point. But I remember my mom and I, with the moment when we're on I-30 trying to get home. And I remember us coming to that point where they merged back, and it really, really being real. Like, something incredible has happened to us here.
Yeah.
Something highly unexplainable. And I remember my mom and I, there was an understanding of sorts that kept passing between us. And we both just kind of kept shaking our heads like, what do you don't, in a moment like that, you really don't have a lot of language around it. You're just like,
you're incapable of putting what happened into words.
Well, we both kind of kept going, did that really did I imagine, I mean, and we retraced our steps, went back through, no, we went under that underpass and we took a left. We were going west. I mean, like, and she said, did you notice that truck was in front of us right as soon as we turned? And I said, yeah, I noticed that. And that 18-wheeler kind of blocked our view. Mm-hmm. And what I believe happened, I mean, I believe the Lord moved us in time and space. I mean, just to say what everybody is probably wondering if I really believe, yes, I believe the Lord moved us in time and in space. And for some unknown reason, but I believe it was a protection. I've always believed it was just the Lord was protecting me, other people, my mom.
Yeah.
He was also showing us his realness and his power. I think we have these radical moments in our lives, and this one was a very surreal. Putting words and language around that's hard, but I think we are given these radical moments. Yours may not be moving in time and space, but I think we have these moments where the Lord shows his might and his power and his mystery and the beauty of that he is in control. And that was the moment where I realized, oh my gosh, this God is real.
Yeah, big
God. Real big God.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, as we were talking before we hit record and talking about the story in Acts 8 with the eunuch, we don't know the why. Doesn't tell us why the eunuch disappeared.
Yeah. Or wasn't it Philip?
Or Philip disappeared.
Yeah, it was Philip that would baptized him.
Yeah.
And then it said the eunuch was filled with joy, but Philip was whisked
gone.
away.
Gone.
Yeah, and he never saw him again.
Yeah, he's gone.
Yeah, he was gone.
Why?
No idea.
No idea. Because it doesn't really matter, and it comes back to this theme that I harp on, I think, in every episode. And the cool thing about testimonies are that we get to have an experience through someone else, if we allow ourselves to have an experience with the tangible, real person of the Godhead.
We do.
But it's not the story. It's always the who. It's not that you were transported. That's cool.
Yeah.
And it does put on display the who. Yeah. And you don't have to know the why. You can guess, and you can be an educated guess. There's a specific reason that had to do something with your good.
Oh yeah. I mean, we believe that he's working all things together for our good. Well,
absolutely.
I fully believe. And I have some thoughts on why I think he moved us. I don't know if it was protection. I think honestly, I think the Lord will do things to get our attention. I think it was an opportunity to get our attention. But it's what you do with it. Like, what do you do whenever God shows up like that or shows up in your life in a radical way? What do you do with that moment? Do you allow him? I think it could have been very easy for us to try to somehow rationalize it away. And I didn't even buy that. I brought this map today. I didn't buy it till last week because there was a part of me that just kept thinking, I'm crazy. There's no way this really happened to me. Like, there's no... maybe my mom, maybe, we couldn't talk about it a lot after that because as it turns out, whenever you try to share that story with somebody, there are a lot of people like you said earlier that go,
yeah, I
don't know what to think about that. That doesn't fit in people's tiny little boxes.
No.
And there was a very limited amount of times we shared it with my dad, and I think he probably thought, oh wow, okay, I don't remember what his reaction was, but we didn't talk about it a lot. But it's I've never forgotten it. you don't forget the moment where God literally moves you in time and space. You don't forget that.
Yeah.
Even if you don't talk about it a lot, it's still like it becomes part of your, I don't want to say your identity, but it really does. It gets in you that I've seen God. Like, I may not have seen him physically, but I watched him move my mom and I into a place. There was no way on earth we had been in the car long enough to get there. There was no way on earth we would have, that we weren't going the right direction. To have gotten to that place would have required so much deliberate effort. And so when you see God do something like that, you're never the same.
Yeah. It's an anchor.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's anchor. I don't necessarily think it's anchored my faith, but it woke me up.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. Good. We all need that. We all need to be woken up.
Yeah.
We're alive.
Yeah.
Let's be awake.
Yeah.
And you talk about how these moments are unbelievable. Last week, on their last episode of Radical, I had Jay Winfrey on, which we talked about Jay and our story with you. And he had some just incredible wisdom about being weird. And he said that it should be our pursuit as believers that we stay in a constant, and I'm butchering his words here, but we stay in a state of constant weirdness, that the weird is when someone points it out. And so I love that the Father's taken me on such a journey that I hear a story like this and I say, why not?
Yeah.
Whereas that was not the case 4 years ago.
Yeah.
I'd have laughed you out that front door.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't have a podcast, but and if I did, I would have laughed you out the front door.
Yeah.
But that's the beauty of sharing these stories, is because I firmly believe that someone's going to hear this and something's going to shift.
Mm-hmm.
A mindset will change. A chain will break off. A revelation that has nothing to do with this will now be able to penetrate into their human brain, because for a moment and an instant, they let God out of a box.
Yeah.
And that's powerful when that happens.
It is. And I think when we talked earlier about being bold in our faith, the boldness to be able to sit here and share this story that is truly unbelievable. And that's okay. I'm okay. If people can't receive it, that's all right. I've come to be okay with that. But our boldness and our faith it grows. You're either going to grow bolder or you're going to shrink back. There's no middle ground here. And for you and I, it's funny, just as we are both podcasters, and this is the way the Lord is, I love that God has allowed our paths to cross. It just delights me. But our boldness is often, when you see someone who is a bold person in their faith, like me being like, hey, I'm going to tell you all my story of how God just picked me up and moved me in time and space. I'm not crazy. I mean, that boldness has come from a deliberate decision to trust that he is who he says he is, and that he can do what he says he can do, and that he does not operate under the same restrictions that our flesh operates. He is outside of time and gravity, and he is outside of every dimension of our world that our flesh is confined to. He's not bound by that.
Yeah, that's so good. So true.
That's where I think
he created all that.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So the boldness in me to be able to go, well, this is what happened to me. Yeah, I think God's going to show other people that. Well, let me rephrase that. When you said that about, I would have laughed you out the front door. I wouldn't have had, Kristi Lowe, I would not have had the courage to tell that story even a year ago.
Yeah.
So wherever someone is, just a little bit of boldness. It's like that faith of a mustard seed. That boldness of a mustard seed, man, she will explode. You just got to give him a little bit of space to let it grow.
It's funny that you just said that. So recently someone shared something with me, and we're going long here, so I'll wrap it up. But about the faith of the mustard seed.
Mm-hmm.
And that there's kind of two stories in that. Yes, it's a little bit of faith. There is that truth. There's a little bit of faith becomes this huge tree. But I didn't know this, that the Jewish people, they used mustard seeds because to terraform. And what I mean by that is a mustard seed would grow kind of anywhere. If you put it on the ground, it was going to find a place to take root and it was going to grow. So if they needed a canal or a road or something built through like a mountain pass, mm-hmm. they would plant mustard seeds. And out of those plantings, these trees would grow and the roots would break up the rock enough that they could move mountains.
Wow.
So they terraformed with these seeds. And so it's to them, it was also a picture of a little bit, just a little bit will break through and break off whatever is keeping you from marching forward.
Yes.
And I was like, man, that's good.
That's good stuff. That'll preach.
Good. That'll preach
for days, man.
And then we'll finish with this as to kind of bring it back to even if the testimonies that are shared with you, they're entrusted to you, and the beauty of how that is growing you up in boldness. The other theme that I am passionate about is, as believers, we should have fun. Mm-hmm. And I'll also say, if you're not having fun, that's okay. That life's not always fun, mm-hmm. but it should not be devoid of fun. As you come into this boldness, as he's teaching you things through people being vulnerable mm-hmm. and sharing, how much fun are you having?
I say this pretty regularly. I'm having the time of my life. This has been life-giving. I really mean it. It's the honor of a lifetime. And it's different than I thought it would be. I tend to be kind of a funny, like lighthearted person. And if you listen to my podcast now that I'm kind of getting a little bit more confident and I'll let my humor kind of come through a little bit. When I first started, I was terrified. I was like, I'm going to scare people to death if I show them who I really am and really be who I am on there. But what I've realized is that getting to share these stories and getting to hold these places with people is the way that I can help other people see that there may be struggle, but our past and what's happened to us does not disqualify us from future joy.
And that is good.
Yeah.
That is so good. Yeah, because he has our good in mind.
He does. And you may be walking through things that are horrible. And I love, one of the reasons why I've said this to other people. I don't know if I've said this to you, Andrew. One of the reasons I love you is I love that you were willing to go, this is what I did. Here it is. Yeah. And own it. And it is life-giving for another person to hear someone admit what they did wrong. Like, we don't talk about our sin and our struggles. We talk about what happened to us. We don't often talk about what we did. The things that it's a lot harder to talk about those things.
For sure.
And so the story part and getting to share people's stories, one of the most fun things I get to do is hold that mirror up and go, this may have been what happened, but God's going to redeem it and use it. And you don't have to live in martyrdom for what happened in someone's life or what happened to you forever. No. You don't. You can truly just walk forward in freedom. And I think that's what a lot of people don't realize is that once you allow the Lord to heal something, once you let him get on the other side, like get you through it, go through it and get to the other side, there is joy, and you're going to get joy again. And so that's why, I don't know, is what I get to do is just, it blows my mind. God would let me do this.
Yeah. And if you haven't checked out Even If with Kristi, please do. She is so gifted.
Thank you.
And so, again, just going back, so trustworthy in the way that she takes people's story and she becomes the storyteller in the way that she so faithfully presents the Father in the stories. So please do that. And if you have a story to tell, reach out to Kristi, because she'll give you the platform to do that, to put the who on display for sure.
I think it's pretty cool to get to let other people bring about and show other people what God's done in their lives. Never gets old. Thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you. And this is the podcast that was on my mind when I started this. We've been all over the place, and I love that. You know, I had someone text me last night, "Hey, you're the Joe Rogan of Christian podcasts."
Yeah.
Just because there's no linear path to this thing. There never will be. If it ever gets super linear, I'm going to quit, because I'm a Enneagram 7, even though
You're like my brother from another mother.
Yeah, and I told my wife when she told me that, I am not an Enneagram 7. You do not put me in a box. Do not label me. And she goes, do you know that's kind of part of the description too, is that you don't want to be labeled. You don't want to be put in a box. I'm like, get out of here with that witchcraft.
I want my freedom. I want my options.
Yes.
Do not make me have a choice.
Yeah. So thank you for coming on.
Yes.
Thank you for being vulnerable and working through the camera issues. This will still go on YouTube, but it'll just be mainly our beautiful voices.
It will. Our beautiful voices.
Yes.
Thanks, Andrew. I really appreciate you.
Yeah. Thanks, Kristi.
Yeah, sure.